Io devo dirvi che per me è un gran piacere e un onore per me partecipare in questo congresso della Società Italiana di Storia della Fisica e dell'Astronomia. E vorrei ringraziare a Ivana Gambaro per l'invitazione. Io devo dirvi che capisco bene l'italiano, ma purtroppo non riesco a parlarlo bene. La vostra lingua è bellissima, ma come sapete è un po' più difficile per un straniero di parlarla bene, almeno per me, parlare senza errori, perché come sapete c'è molti verbi irregolari, comunque per me è un po' difficile. Beh, quindi io parlerò in inglese lentamente, ma per favore sentitevi liberi di farmi le domande in italiano, che io intenterò di rispondere pure in italiano. Okay, so I will switch language and I will speak in English as I mentioned. Well, today I will discuss the impact that the astronomical observation carried out by Galileo around 1610, 1611 had upon the Jesuits and their cosmological views. There is a common view according to which, the observation of Venus phases, particularly the phases of Venus, but also the four satellites of Jupiter, led the Jesuits to officially adopting the geocentric system of Tycho Brahe, a system in which all the planets revolve around the Sun and the Sun together with the Earth move around the Earth. And in fact, in 1620, Giuseppe Bianchini's book Sfera Mundi was published, and it displayed a representation of the Tychonic system. As the publication of this book was preceded by a distressing process of internal censorship, the censorship within the Society of Jesus, the appearance of Bianchini's book has been regarded as the turning point in the Jesuit cultural politics, a moment in which Jesuits started to officially accept the model of Tycho Brahe. And of course, the condemnation of Copernicanism by the Catholic Church in 1660s played a central role in this process. On the one hand, the traditional Ptolemaic system with its 10 to 11 solid orbs was no longer tenable. On the other hand, the Jesuit astronomers were prohibited to follow Copernican ideas. Thus, the adoption of Tychonism was the only solution. Accordingly, Christine Jones at Schofield once stated that, and I quote, "The majority of those who rejected the Copernican system on the religious grounds and who, when developments in cosmology rendered obsolete an anti-geocentric planetary theory, found that of Tycho an acceptable compromise, were the members of the Society of Jesus." End of quotation. Well, needless to say that, Schofield got it right. Nevertheless, the process of reception of Tychonic ideas among Jesuits and their ability to respond to the challenge raised by the Galilean telescopic observation was much more complex than usually assumed. Not all the Jesuit astronomers who accepted the Galilean observation necessarily traced paths followed basically Tychonism. Some Jesuit astronomers were able to integrate the new observation in a much more traditional cosmological framework. And I shall argue that this would be the solution of Clavius, the solution advocated by Clavius, if he had not died in 1612. I will make my point by addressing the case of the Jesuit astronomer Giovanni Paolo Lembo. Lembo was born in 1578 in Benevento, I believe in Campania. He entered the Society of Jesus in Naples in the early 17th century, where he studied philosophy and mathematics under Giovanni Giacomo Stazzerio. In 1607, he moved to Rome to study theology and, what is more, to study advanced mathematics in the so-called Academy of Mathematics run by Clavius in Collegio Romano. In Rome, Lambo joined us, a group of advanced students and collaborators of Clavius, a group which included, for example, Christoph Grinenberger, Otto van Maliakoff, and Paul Godin, and others. Well, in Rome, Lambo also became an accomplished telescope maker. He was indeed the principal responsible for the making of telescopes at the Collegio Romano. In a well-known letter that Grinenberger addressed to Galileo on January 1611, Grinenberger reported that Lambo had produced the first telescope as early as spring or summer 1610. And he mentioned, I quote, before hearing anything about your instrument, he had made some space glasses himself, not by imitation of others, but rather by the power of inference. He observed both the lunar irregularities and the multitude of stars in the Pleiades, Orion, and other constellations, but he did not see the new planets. End of quotation. Well, with this telescope, but also with other telescopes that the Jesuits made at the Collegio Romano, and also that they received, namely from Antonio Santini, Lambo took part in the Jesuit team that observed the Milky Way, the Moon's uneven surface, the Venus phases, the four satellites of Jupiter, and the apparent three body of Saturn. And in April 1611, Clavius himself acknowledged the role played by Lambo in this observation. And in fact, Lambo was one of the four co-signers of the letter addressed to the Cardinal Roberto Bellarmino, in which the Jesuits mathematicians recognized, observed and confirmed basically the astronomical phenomena revealed by Galileo. And as you can see, he was the fourth signer of this letter. In 1614-15, Lambo went to Lisbon. He moved to Lisbon to teach mathematics at the Jesuit College of Saint Antão. In Lisbon, he continued his astronomical observation and researches. But a couple of years later, he got ill, seriously ill, and because of that, he went back to Italy, and he died. He went back in 1617, and he died shortly after that in Naples in May 1680. Well, apart from being a close collaborator of Clavius, he was also one of the main advocates of Clavius' cosmological ideas. Well, I'm not going into details about Clavius' cosmological and astronomical ideas, but let me simply remind you that the German professor of the Collegio Romano was a stronger believer of celestial solidity. Following the Ptolemaic astronomical tradition, he argued in favor of a complex system of solid orbs comprising several epicycles and eccentrical cycles. According to Clavius, this was the only way one can account for the apparent change in velocity, direction, and distances of the planets. Furthermore, the system constituted the only possible means of fully respecting the Aristotelic dictum that celestial bodies perform one single circular and earth-centered motion. Well, according to Clavius, the different epicycles and eccentric cycles form partial spheres, which were included in a single sphere, in a single complete sphere, the so-called sphaera tota. The universe, as Clavius presents us, comprise 33 partial orbs with 27 going around the Earth plus 6 epicycles. The partial spheres were then comprised within 12 complete spheres concentric with the universe, as you can see on the right. Well, Clavius attributed a planet as one sphere to each planet, plus the sphere of the firmament, and two additional spheres above the firmament to account for the trepidation and the precession of the equinoxes, plus the sphere of the primum mobile. And the imperial heaven was basically supposed to seal this universe, forming thus 12 complete spheres. Well, the notion of celestial solidity was therefore instrumental to Clavius cosmology. And in this context, the new telescopic observation of 1610-11 risked collapse this entire edifice. On the top of that, Clavius himself recognized the phenomena that were disclosed by Galileo and by by the telescope. So, according to in the last edition of his Commentario in Spherem that was published in 1611, shortly before his death, basically Clavius recognized that the phenomena were real phenomena and not kind of optical illusion. Okay, I'm not going to read the entire text, because it's a little bit long, but there are two topics that I would like to stress now. The first one is that Clavius, with the Jesuits, used the telescope to make this kind of telescopic observation, and the second one is the fact that Clavius did recognize that these were serious phenomena, that were real phenomena, not optical illusion. Okay, although it is important to mention, that I will do shortly in a brief time, Clavius did not draw any kind of cosmological output from based on this observation. And at the end of this part, Clavius added, and I quote, "Since this is so, astronomers ought to see how the celestial orbs may be arranged in order to save the phenomena." Or in other words, Clavius explicitly recognized that his cosmological ideas, the cosmological ideas that he shared his entire life and that was based on the Ptolemaic theory, were no longer tenable. But the question is, what is the real meaning of Clavius' words? Did he intend astronomers to search for an astronomical system, or instead to accommodate the new telescopic observation within the received astronomical theory? Well, according to Grinberger, and Grinberger was probably the closest collaborator of Clavius while in Rome, it is most likely that Clavius would choose the second path, that is to say, he probably would work out a solution within the traditional framework. So, or he would not follow a Tychonic path, so to speak. And as Grinberger put it, and I quote, "I'm aware, as were those who also work intimately with him, that Clavius abhorred the fluidity of heavens until the end of his life, and accordingly he searched for argument through which he could save the phenomena in an ordinary way. He was less apprehensive concerning the corruptibility of heavens. Thus, when he recommended considering other spheres, it seems that he wished for the new observation to be accommodated within the old hypothesis rather than changing it completely." End of quotation. But the question is, how could this be achieved? How would it be possible to recognize the phases of Venus and at the same time arguing that the celestial heavens were solid and not fluid? Okay. Well, I will answer these questions by focusing, as already mentioned, on Lembo. There are basically four reasons that support my choice. First of all, as I mentioned, Lembo was a strong supporter of Clavius' cosmological ideas, namely the notion of that heavens were solid bodies. Secondly, Lembo was one of the two Jesuits who survived long enough to work out a solution for this problem. As I mentioned, Clavius himself died in February 1612. Maelcot died shortly after, in May 1615. And Greenberger, in turn, he renounced any kind of participation in the public astronomical debates in the wake of the Catholic Church condemnation of heliocentrism in 1660. Thirdly, unlike his Jesuit fellows, the mathematicians of Collegio Romano, and I mentioned I'm thinking of Clavius, Greenberger, and Maelcot, who avoided drawing cosmological consequences from the Venus phases, Lembo did acknowledge that the phases of Venus prove that the planet orbits around the Sun. So he addressed basically the key issue. Finally, while teaching in Lisbon, Lembo worked out a solution for this problem. So, let us let us move to Lisbon, if I may use the expression, with Lembo. Well, in Lisbon, this Italian astronomer, he relied on the authority of Clavius to delve into the cosmological discussion. After quoting Clavius' plea, Lembo stated, and I quote, that Clavius seemed to provide us with the permission to arrange the celestial orbs in a somewhat different way to how he and the other astronomers had done. End of quotation. So, with these words in mind, Lembo embarked on a program of astronomical observation in Lisbon, observation of phases of Venus, but he also observed or tried to observe the phases of Mercury. In 1615, only a couple of months after his arrival, according to him, he had already shown the phases of Venus not only to his students but also to other virtuosi. So he displayed a kind of public observation of this Mercury in this case. Well, this program was instrumental because it led him to acknowledge that Venus and Mercury move around the Sun and not around the Earth. In Lembo's words, and I quote, to save their appearances, which are so similar to those of the Moon, we must confess that Venus and Mercury move around the Sun, and sometimes they are below it and sometimes above, sometimes they move before it and sometimes after. End of quotation. So, the heliocentric orbit of Venus and Mercury, however, did not persuade Lembo, to accept the geocentric system of Tycho Brahe. And I think probably there are two reasons that explain Lembo's position. Well, first of all, because of the intersection of the orbits of the Sun and Mars, the Tychonic system requires, the celestial region to be fluid, which is basically, and as we have already seen, Lembo refuted this idea alongside Clavius. Furthermore, while recognizing that Tycho was an expert observer, Lembo disagreed with the path and dimension that the Danish astronomer had attributed to the orbits of Jupiter, and Saturn. According to him, the orbits of these planets did not move away and back around the Earth as Tycho has argued. So they were, according to Lembo, concentric to the Earth. So Lembo worked out this planetary system. Well, this is indeed a geocentric system, but it is obviously different from that of Tycho Brahe. According to Lembo, Venus and Mercury move around the Sun. Thus, the Sun, Venus, and Mercury occupied and shared the same one single solid orb. As he stated, and I quote, having shown and proven that this, basically the phases of Venus and Mercury. Who would disagree in placing the Sun, Venus, and Mercury in some orb, excluding at least two other orbs from the number traditionally recognized so far? Well, the Sun, together with the remaining planets and the fixed stars, were supposed to move inside solid and concentric orbs, concentric to the Earth. Okay? So above the Saturn orb, two further, celestial spheres were supposed to exist, and they accounted for the precession of the equinoxes, the trepidation movements, and also the diurnal motions. And as Clavius and several Catholic astronomers, Lambo also argued that the universe was sealed by the imperial heaven. Okay, so probably I believe that some of you have already devised that this kind of system was already put forward by Marcianus Capella in the late 4th and early 15th centuries, and this model was profusely debated in early Middle Ages. Anyway, I think it is interesting to see that Lambo presented the system as his own system. As you can see there, the caption to the diagram displaying the planetary arrangement in fact stated, and I quote, "The order of the celestial orbs, according to the opinion of our professor, Father Paolo Lambo, Italian, of the Society of Jesus." Well, in fact, by late 16th century and even early 17th century, several astronomers were inspired by Capella's ideas. The reference made by Copernicus in the first book of is De Revolutionibus, but also the fact that the diagram was included in a book published by Valentin Naibot, Prime de Quelle et Terra Distitutiones, a book published in 1573. This contributed basically to make this Capella system a popular one at the turn of the 17th century. One astronomer, for example, Nicolaus Ursus, for example, put forward a planetary system that is similar in some way to that of Tycho. Ursus, as you know, was an astronomer and imperial mathematician to Rudolf II in Prague, and he was famous because he became involved in a controversy with Tycho Brahe over the priority of the so-called Tychonic system. I'm not going to discuss it now, but Origanus, also professor of mathematics at University of Frankfurt Oder, also presented a system, but it's more in tune with Tycho Brahe's rearrangement. Nevertheless, I would like to stress that the starting point was completely different. While Lambo and other Jesuits were trying hard to accommodate the output of the new telescopic observation into a traditional Aristotelian Ptolemaic worldview, Ursus and Origanus were in the process of transforming the Copernican system into a plausible geocentric model. Like other professors, other astronomers active in northern Germany and northern Europe in the late 16th century, Ursus and Origanus, particularly Ursus, was persuaded that if the roles of the Earth and the Sun were reversed, an equivalence would emerge between the heliocentric and geocentric theories. So, and this belief led Ursus and others, to devise a kind of a Capellian-inspired system akin to which Lambo later would develop. But despite this similitude, there are deep differences between these systems. The systems basically put forward by Ursus, Origanus, and Lambo. In fact, Lambo disagreed with Ursus and Origanus on some crucial cosmological tenets, such as, first of all, the fluidity of heavens that was shared both by Ursus and Origanus, the Earth's daily rotation on its axis, which was recognized by both Ursus and Origanus, Also the circumsolar orbit of the superior planets, which was admitted by Ursus and Origanus, and also the intersection of the orbits of the Sun and Mars that was supported by Origanus in tune with Tycho. So these four central tenets were strongly denied by Lambo, and this is very important, Lambo argued in favor of celestial solidity on the Earth's static position. He also argued in favor of the circumterrestrial orbit of the superior planets, and he refused the intersection of the orbits of the Sun and Mars. Or, in other words, Lambo presented a much more conventional cosmological model. And even though he managed to successfully explain the Galilean observation, particularly the phases of Venus and the satellites of Jupiter, and I think this is interesting, although it's a sort of conservative answer to the problem, in a certain way, it solved part of the problem. So, contrary to what historians commonly argue, the Galilean observation did not necessarily lead to the Jesuits adopting the system of Tycho Brahe, which required the heavens to be fluid, as I mentioned. By arguing that Venus and Mercury move around the Sun in epicycles, he was in position of recognizing that the Sun, Venus, and Mercury share the same orb, a solid orb. And thus, he saved one of the cornerstones of Ptolemaic cosmology, which was the solidity of heavens, a principle that, as we have already seen, was very dear to Clavius. By so doing, Giovanni Paolo Lambo put forward an astronomical system that came to terms with the telescopic observation, while at the same time maintaining Clavius' cosmological postulates. The output of Lambo's cosmological and astronomical consideration was a conservative system of Capellian inspiration, yet a system able to respond to the main challenges of the time and the Galilean and the telescopic astronomy. So this leads me to my conclusion, and I believe that this case allows us to draw three conclusions. First of all, it shows us that the traditional Aristotelian Ptolemaic system was not immediately destroyed by the Galilean observation. Despite being obviously wrong, it had the theoretical means that allow the astronomers to explain some disruptive phenomena, such as the phases of Venus, Mercury, and the satellites of Jupiter. Secondly, Lambo's case shows us that the Jesuit reception of Tycho Brahe's system was not a straightforward process, as it has been usually described. It was a much more complex process with solution other than that of Tycho Brahe. And finally, the study of Lambo's system in the context of his collaboration with Clavius in Rome allow us to conclude that this geocentric system of Capellian inspiration was probably what Clavius had in mind when he urged the astronomers to work out a solution to the new telescopic observation carried out by Galileo and others. So, thank you very much.
Grazie Carolino. Ci sono due domande, chiedo a Salvatore se c'è tempo di farne ambedue. Comunque do la parola al primo, che è Giancarlo Truffa.
Abbiamo 4 minuti comunque.
Ah, vabbè, ce la facciamo se sono sintetici. Giancarlo, a te la parola.
Avevo messo il video, scusate, non l'audio. Buongiorno Luis, una domanda.
Buongiorno.
Dato che ne abbiamo discusso tante volte in passato, il ruolo di Borri nell'inserimento della teoria geoeliocentrica di Tycho nella compagnia è documentata dai suoi insegnamenti a Milano nel 1612 circa, più o meno 10-12, no? E poi è pubblicato solo nel 32. pensi che ci sia stata qualche influenza con Lembo e con altri nel frattempo, o cosa ne pensi al riguardo? Cioè, come si arriva a Bianchini, che poi diventa, diciamo, a Biancani, che diventa la versione ufficiale, poi essendo stampato nel 1620, da quello che era la posizione cosmologica della compagnia, più o meno.
Sì.
È
Grazie.
chiaro?
Sì. Prima di tutto, ciao Giancarlo, un piacere parlare con te. Abbiamo trovato qualche email, ma è un piacere vederti. Purtroppo non è al vivo. Io intenterò di risponderti in italiano. Peço scusa per tutti i miei errori del linguaggio, ok? Giancarlo, io penso che Borri, come tu hai menzionato, lui ha studiato in Milano, e infatti il fatto che lui era in Milano, lui è riuscito a stare più lontano dalle tensioni del gruppo che era a Roma, più prossimo di Clavius. Io penso perché loro, qualcuno che ha lavorato con Clavius in quel momento, era più difficile di negare la teoria della solidità celeste. Borri ha letto Tycho Brahe quando era a Milano, e ha fatto tutto un tragitto un po' diverso. È vero che lui, prima di andare a Lisbona e poi a Macao, in Cina, ho parlato con Biancani, secondo lui, in una lettera che lui scrive in 31 a Vitelleschi, al generale, secondo Borri, Borri presenta a Biancani le sue teorie sul sistema, e in particolare sulla questione della fluidità celeste. Ma io penso, Giancarlo, che Lembo e Borri, ovviamente che ambi erano gesuiti, ma appartengono a sfere un po' diverse, non comunicanti in questo momento. Okay? La persona, come tu hai menzionato, che va a fare la connessione è Biancani. Non so se ti ho risposto.
Sì, no,
mi scusi l'errore in italiano. Come ti
Grazie.
Difficilmente parlo bene.
Vercigli, una fulminea domanda e un'altrettanto fulminea risposta. Vercigli?
Sì, no, ci sono. Salve. I would like to thank you, Professor Carolino, for your talk. It was really eye-opening for me, because I only know Clavius only for the side of mathematical part. I would like to ask you, because it has sparked my curiosity about the Portuguese scientific world. Has it Lembo created a significant legacy over the Portuguese scientists between the 15th, 16th, and 17th century, and how they communicate with Italian world where Lembo come from?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Erica, for your question. I'm answering in a very, very brief way. There are, in fact, in the early 17th century, several Italian astronomers that play a very important role in Portugal, that basically created a kind of astronomical tradition here. And the fact has to do with the lack of, proper trained mathematicians and astronomers in Portugal. So when the Jesuits were asked by the King Sebastian, to open a class on mathematics, the Portuguese guys, they didn't have a kind of expert mathematicians, and this is the reason why they asked, experts from Rome from Rome or from Italy to teach in Portugal. And Lembo was one of the first. Also Greenberger and Borri. Eric, I don't know if I have answered your question in a brief way.
No, you did answer it. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
C'è una domanda di Ivana Gambaro. Ivana, mi raccomando,
Sarò
per i tempi.
brevissima, sarò brevissima. Grazie del bellissimo intervento, Luis. Mi domandavo come Lembo giustifica nel suo modello la solidità delle sfere e comunque la possibilità che egli assume che Mercurio e Venere ruotino intorno al Sole. Mi sembra che possa essere fonte di qualche problema per lui, forse questo.
Sì, sì. Grazie, Ivana. In una forma rapida, la soluzione che Lembo segue è creare orbi così grandi in cui, per esempio, i satelliti di Jupiter rodavano intorno a Jupiter in un orbe solido grande, dove aveva spazio ma la struttura rimaneva solida.
Ok, grazie. Grazie.
Prego.
Con questo intervento io ringrazio ancora Carolino e passiamo alla